Welcome everybody to episode 40. Wow, we've got the hump. Life has begun, and it began with the Frighteners. There you go. So yes, it's myself, Ashley, and our selector. Don't know why I said it like that. Been watching too much Ali G, I guess. AJ.
I'm gonna desperately search for energy because not only is it the usual "oh, I haven't really slept" thing, but I also just shot a video with my brother that went for over 2 hours. That's gonna go up at the end of the month. So
Blimey.
I'm I'm almost out of energy and voice and all that. But I really love this movie, so I'm hoping the energy comes to me.
Yeah. Something I didn't realise until I actually looked into it. This, along with Mars Attacks, was really Fox's last films.
Yeah.
Because pretty much everything he did was either cameos or predominantly voice work. Ever since, the Stuart Littles, the cameo I think it said that he had in Annie, which was like, I don't remember that. Obviously, a lot of documentaries as well, but and I also find it fascinating that this is the film that may let Peter Jackson make King Kong. Universal were that impressed by one of the early cuts. They said, "Do you want to do King Kong?" And he said yes. And it took 9 years. So, I mean, to be fair, something to do with hobbits or something came in the middle. It may have been slightly more important. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess it's because of the size of Lord of the Rings, but to say there's only 9 years between the Frighteners and Kong seems insane to me. It seems like they're like an eternity apart.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, technically, it's going to be about 9 years, I think, for his next stuff. Because the last film I think he technically did would have been that last Hobbit film. If you don't count the documentaries that he's done, for the First World War and the Beatles. And supposedly the Tintin sequel is happening, and it's coming in 2025. That's
It's only what 14 years
yeah.
after.
I guess we're following the footsteps of James Cameron. But yeah, like it's. I also find it fascinating. Whoever moderates Wikipedia has done a bad job, because the first two or three paragraphs is about 75% of the movie. The other 2/3 of the write up is like the last 30 minutes. Just like crap. Because I was thinking, okay, pacing, that's going to be interesting. And then it's like, oh, wait, this seems slow because I'm trying to go by where it goes in terms of Wikipedia as well. It's badly it is badly need of sort of amendments and whatever to try and make it juicier or whatever, rather than whoever was like, oh, I'm gonna type all this. But yeah, like it's interesting that this is to some extent the last horror film that we got from Jackson. To some
Yeah,
extent.
it's really funny when you go back and see that the reviews for this weren't terrible, but they were mixed. And there were a lot of critics that just didn't like it, and you'll notice a common pattern in those bad reviews is it seems like the critics were really hung up on the fact that his last movie before it was Heavenly Creatures, and they wanted something like that, it seems. And I don't if when Peter Jackson comes out with a horror movie, especially when he was still kind of in this era in the 90s, I feel like the people that wanted a follow up to Heavenly Creatures weren't aware of everything that came before Heavenly Creatures. Because Heavenly Creatures is the one that sticks out when you look at what he had done up to this point.
And to be fair as well, it was probably Frighteners is the least comedic of his horror films, really.
Yeah, which is interesting because of how comedic it still is.
Yeah, the humor is still in there, but it's not the gross out humor that was prevalent in like Bad Taste and Brain Dead and everything.
Yeah, and even Meet the Feebles, I feel like like all of those like you could classify as comedies along with the others. I don't think you can go quite that far with this one, but I feel like this one's if you can't call this one a comedy along with the horror element, it's pretty close.
It's more of a black comedy than sort of like I want to say some of the other ones sort of go spoof esque because they're that over the top, whereas this one just seems to have sort of humor sort of melded into it rather than the humor sort of being the outright plot, especially with the actual story that like gets pretty dark in places.
Yeah, and I think one case where you can really look at a specific thing about this movie that kind of dictates where we are with that is what Jeffrey Combs is doing, who might be my favorite part of the whole movie because in any other like if you were to write that character down on paper, he sounds absolutely terrifying and he is absolutely terrifying, but the performance is hysterical. Like the more insane and almost horror like the character gets, the funnier it is. And the fact that it's a character whose insanity comes from he went undercover with too many cults that's driven into insanity, and he's had like his body mutilated in some sort of way. It's absolutely a horror character, and he also might be the funniest part about it.
I mean the
The best thing is when you watch the blooper reel and nobody can get through his close-ups without laughing.
I mean like part of it some of the time I was thinking, wait, is this like some is the ghost somehow possessed him and like this is his human form for him to sort of get round and get away with this stuff? And then when it clearly becomes, oh no, it's just he's a nutcase. That bit when he goes to the cemetery and his lead plate is gone and instead it's just all these sort of Summer of Sam sort of like all these sort of carvings like on his chest. It's like wow.
It takes finding a perfect tone to make that stuff as funny as it is. That's why I love Jeffrey Combs in general because anytime his name is in the credits of something, you already know that they're taking it up a notch
Yeah.
just just by using him. I had a friend who met him at a convention, and by the way she told the story, it sounds like he's very intense, but in a fun way, which is basically what his performances are. And I love that that's basically just him. It seems.
But yeah, like some of the little bits that you get here and there, John Astin as the judge, of which his blooming his synopsis of his character on Wikipedia pretty much is just his entire scenes. You know, the gunslinger from the Old West with a penchant for mummies and firing guns at random. That's all he does in the film. And he's awesome.
I yeah, I don't think I've it's on my Blu-ray, but I actually don't think I've ever watched the director's cut. But it is to my understanding. I think it's just like it sounds like more scenes of like John Aston and Shy McBride and those ghosts are pretty much most of what the additions consist of.
To some extent, I think, yeah.
Because it does feel like it's a part that's cut down, but there's still some. I think a lot of that also has to do with not only how much fun the ghost actors are obviously having, but this really wild idea to completely cover them in elaborate makeup, which would be like, a great thing in itself. But then to do the elaborate makeup and then do visual effects over that is wild.
All hail our Lord and Savior Rick Baker. That's what I need to say. Like, some of the
Because that,
practical stuff that he does for that is like. This is probably one of the first times where we've had digital enhancement of, like, prosthetic stuff, I think. As I don't think we had anything to that sort of degree with, like, the Freddy stuff. I don't think Craven really went down there with, like, New Nightmare in the sort of early to mid 90s.
yeah, I think almost all of Freddy's stuff is usually practical.
Yeah.
What's also so amazing about that is that, and it's kind of a shame, but it's also kind of a really big compliment, is I can only assume audiences of today would probably automatically assume it's all CGI when they see the ghosts in this. And it's interesting, especially when you watch the behind the scenes stuff, how kind of most of it is makeup, actually, it feels like. Especially like Aston's jaw is something you would almost think has to be CGI, and it's not, with the
Yeah.
exception of the making him look ghost-like is the only like computer effect.
Mm-hmm. As I say, like, Rick got a lot of. Didn't get a lot of credit for a lot of things that he did. And, like, some of the sort of workings that he does with, like, just the concept of that is pretty key, you know. Doing practical effects for semi-digital things. As I say, I think it's ahead of its time, because if you look at sort of what people can do, I mean, the problem is nowadays it'd probably just be sort of green screened, or they'd get the sort of balls on to sort of, I mean, like how we saw with Two-Face in The Dark Knight. It will just be CGI added on. Whereas if you had some sort of prosthetic thing to it, but then add to it, I think that would make it sort of actually look creepier in a lot of cases, in a lot of films that we get, rather than just getting a computer to do it.
Yeah, Two-Face is one of those things where I'm always surprised when I remember how much of it is makeup because it looks like a lot of CGI. But I think that's also a testament to Jackson. Like, obviously people who knew Jackson's horror movies knew that even when it was like he was working for really cheap, the effects were still kind of spectacular for the low budget movies he was making.
Yeah.
But the fact that this was like the turning point in his career, where this was like his first time getting like big budgets and like big effects. The budget's actually pretty low, but it's like for him it was a really big budget.
Yeah,
And
I
that
like the fact that it went from. Hang on, let's have a look. I won't include Forgotten Silver because it's sort of a mockumentary, so it's sort of. I don't know whether that fully, but his last big thing, being of course Heavenly Creatures, had a 5 million budget. Frighteners had somewhere in the region of, I think, 20. 25, 26 million. And then Lord of the Rings had, oh, I don't know. Oh, wow, only 93 million. It feels like it had. It
That's
feels like it had more of a budget than 100 million.
that's that. You could definitely say that's a specialty of his because this one looks more expensive than 26 million.
Yeah.
But the way that this was his first outing with a budget like this and big effects that he wasn't used to, and he was still being innovative, kind of showed that he was basically that he was destined to be the Peter Jackson we know now, essentially.
I want to say this probably would have been the first proper showcase of Weta Digital. I would have thought. They had a few little bits here and there for Heavenly Creatures, but I don't think it sort of really went mainstream, probably, until Frighteners, because then after that was. They did CGI for Contact, which makes sense, I guess, because Zemeckis. Zemeckis was like, I want to use that.
Is it weird I made the Jake Busey connection before I made the Zemeckis connection?
Maybe, I don't know. And then from there, they were busy doing Hobbit and all, well, Hobbiton and all the Tolkien stuff, pretty much. And I did see Bry bring it up in chat, which we'll get to in a minute. Some of the CGI stuff, looking at it now, isn't great, but certainly I think for the time, uh, this was pretty good. Let me have a quick
Yeah,
check.
yeah, because it depends on what you're talking about. Because if you're talking about like the wall stuff and the Reaper stuff, that obviously that looks a bit shoddy. But comparing that to what we were just talking about with the CGI enhancing the makeup, is there's like whole different levels of what's going on here effects wise. And yeah, the other like like the scene when they're dragged to hell and stuff like that, maybe I certainly don't want to say Spawn like, but it's certainly better than Spawn's hell. But yeah, like I said there's varying levels considering what they were doing for sure.
Just trying to quickly. Yeah, I don't want to see the hit. I just want to get to 1996. Where is it? Yeah, so the only ones that it would have gone up against at the time was Independence Day, Dragonheart, and Twister, at least at the Oscars, of which practically all of them are CGI. Because part of me doesn't know whether some of like Dragonheart might have had like a practical sort of looking dinosaur head or not.
For the close-ups of like his mouth and his like claws, they were like animatronics and practical, but pretty much everything else was CGI.
Yeah.
Well, the great thing that Dragonheart did was it did the practical stuff around him too. Like when he would dive into water, there was like an explosive in the water that made it look like something dove into it,
Yeah.
and so they put the CGI around that kind of stuff.
But yeah, but the acting performances as well, Fox is sort of good as this. At first you think he's sort of like a shyster and a con artist with what he's doing. But then as the story revolves, you get a very interesting sort of dynamic of him trying to find acceptance or whatever, trying to find his place in
Yeah.
the world, and then when it basically becomes, oh wait, I was just part of a very weird satanic cult bond thing.
That's it. that's the beauty about his character being a con man is you start off thinking he's a con man who's tricking people into thinking there's ghosts in their house. But the thing is there are ghosts in their house for real, but he's still a con man
Yeah.
because he knows them. I love the setup and the concept itself is amazing. And then the fact that it has like an actually there's a few things here because you have the stuff with his wife that gives it the emotional foundation, and then you have the other story coming in of what Jake Busey's doing and the fact that even before he was a ghost, I think it's actually, I mean, with what happens in the world today, especially, it's hard to say this is like cool or appealing. But I mean, if we're talking about a horror movie, just the concept of a mass murderer whose only goal is to break the records of other mass murderers is 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 pretty. I mean, if you're gonna make a serial killer character, that's not a bad story.
What I'm trying to work out is like what record he was going for by the time we get to 40, and what eventually doesn't become 41, but like gets to 40. Because trying to think, you know, Zodiac wouldn't have done 40, I think, even if you include the copycat ones. Or is he trying to do like or how they do it in the sports or the wrestling or whatever, when it's like once you get that far, it's like nobody is going to reach that record. It's like the
Yeah,
unassailable,
it's
it's
like
going to be there forever.
yeah, it's like reaching checkpoints, I
Yeah,
guess.
to some extent. um I also find it fascinating that third on the list of credits, at least on Wikipedia, is bloomin' Peter Dobson as Raylinsky, who's around for maybe 25 minutes and then he's gone.
Yeah,
It does feel
yeah,
weird
because
in
I
that
feel like
respect.
whenever I watch this movie, I feel like Peter Dawson's one of those people that should have been a lot. I'm surprised he wasn't a lot bigger than he was.
There
Because
might have been
I'm
a
a
bit more about establishing his and Lucy's relationship, I think, with the director's cut. There's certainly a few scenes I saw from like something which listed what got cut and what is sort of slightly altered rather than cut. And there seems to be like shots of Ray doing more stuff than what we just actually see.
that would make sense because it does feel like I think what's actually quite funny about Ray's character, and I imagine would have to be intentional, is that he kind of gets an emotional arc, but also doesn't. Like he's more well rounded than we think he is,
Yeah,
but he's also kind of the douchebag that he comes off as right away too.
and yeah, to some extent the MacGuffin as well to like progress on the plot.
Yeah, because at the start it's almost like it's going to be a supernatural themed romantic comedy or something, and then it gets way darker.
Also, I'm trying to work out like the motives for the ones that we see, which is literally basically what Milton does. It's like, well, the motive for Ray's death could be Frank wants to get closer to Lucy, maybe. There's some sort of bond there. Um, the news reporter would be some sort of, because obviously she also reported probably on his crimes and his bell, getting released from the sanatorium or whatever, and all that. And then obviously Lucy herself gets the number on her because she sort of gets too close to knowing like what's going on. So I'm trying to work out what Johnny and Patricia felt was that bad about the guy in the toilet. What literally what is his deal? The other ones I can see connections as to why Johnny and Patricia would want them dead because they see them, as trying to haunt Frank and whatever, or various other things that go against their stuff. But toilet guy makes no sense. Um,
I mean, unless it's about making him look as guilty as possible, in which case, I mean, I don't know how you could plan him being the only other one in the room with him, but
um, and then Boosie and Stone sort of. Stone as Patricia is very sort of well done because at first you think she's sort of the innocent victim in all this, until as it twists and turns and you find out, oh no, she's really into it. Like literally going as far as like being willing to put the blooming the marks in the head
you
of
know,
this of
I
this
love how
because of what the spirit did.
I love how clearly intentional that casting was, where there's nothing we've seen of Dee Wallace prior to this that would make us think that's who that character is.
Yeah. Um.
Not to mention, I mean, now that she's mentioned, I guess we could go into the experience she had on this movie is a really great story that I actually only just heard recently.
Oh.
Where this was the movie she was making when Christopher Stone died, and it's like this whole touching story of how I guess he had had a heart attack, and then she was going to stay with him, and he said, they're holding filming for you, so you have to go keep doing this movie. And so she was basically going back and forth from home to New Zealand, which is like halfway around the world. I think it was like 4 round trips or something in 2.5 weeks, which is a shitload.
Yeah.
Because eventually when he did die, she had to do the whole service, and then she also had her kid and her nanny with her. But she said the way that basically this set embraced her while she went through that was like a big factor in her being able to keep going. Where like Michael J. Fox would like play with her kid on the set, and they had this thing where, because I guess the daughter was like 7 years old, and she's the one that found him when he died, which is unfathomable. So when they were on the set and they were doing the wormhole thing, and Dee Wallace is in like the harness and doing the wire work, the daughter wanted to do that, and they actually made like a specialized harness just so she could do it. And then when it came around to like paying for all those round trip flights, which would have basically been more than her entire salary, apparently she learned that Peter Jackson just took care of it. And so it was just like there was just so much love on this set, and it's like, and it's also kind of that thing about what the movie's about. Also, is very eerily appropriate, I guess, because I guess she also had a moment where it's the moment where she kills Michael J. Fox essentially. And I guess she had a moment where when Michael J. Fox fell to the ground, she like suddenly had a vision that was her husband falling to the ground. So that just doing that whole scene was really intense. And to think that she's playing a character that's significantly more intense than any character she's ever done before.
Hmm.
It's just like how everything kind of added up in a way, for lack of a better term. But I always like I said, I only just heard her talk about that like maybe a few months ago.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how known that story is, as far as like the how she was taken care of on set and stuff like that.
And then sort of like we've obviously talked about John Astin's Judge Ghost, but Cyrus and Stuart are sort of have their own charms. And then of course the elephant in the army uniform. I mean, Ali Ermy basically just being Ali Ermy.
Literally the same lines from Full Metal Jacket, like with no changes.
If only they actually did that for that Crash Bandicoot game where he voiced one of the spirits and whatever. He just actually said the lines from Full Metal Jacket. He didn't. It's annoying. Um, like, I'm guessing when the Grim Reaper got him, he's probably dead. As opposed to what happened with everything that the that happened to Fox's ghost when he shows up. Then again, I guess that's sort of him getting run over, so it's not the actual Reaper, the Reaper
Yeah,
spirit doing it.
yeah, because I always liked the kind of rules the universe sets up in this movie also, where it's like how the ghosts can like be physical to each other.
Yeah,
Where like when one ghost like hurts another, there's actual damage. Is really interesting. And it's the same thing with him, but I guess that goes in with the whole his connection with the supernatural world. It makes him sort of he can kind of go by the same rules almost,
yeah,
even when he's not in like a spectral form. Like he can like actually grab ghosts and do shit like that, which is really interesting.
yeah. Because I guess because of the connection of what happened all the way back in 1990 when the car accident happened. Um, I do. I think it's better probably that it didn't stay as a what was the original intention of basically it being a just a like a TV movie variant of the Tales of the Crypt episode that it was sort of loosely themed around.
I was wondering what exactly that's supposed to be, if it was supposed to be like a feature-length thing or just like an episode, because I'm not sure. There's so much in this. I'm not sure how you cut it down to an episode.
Well, it says it was
Unless
a spin.
unless
It was said it was going to be a spin-off film, but of course, the deal would be you've got to establish these characters in a Tales from the Crypt episode if you're going to make it a spin-off movie. And I don't think you can really do that with what's really presented. Um, because I think it's more effective when we get the flashback during the scene in the old hospital where we actually see the rampage happen. Um, flashing to and from the climax of the film, it happening there as opposed to like being its own sort of separate thing. Um,
yeah, usually I would say I prefer something like that to be two separate scenes, but it's a pretty phenomenal climax the way we go back and forth, and he's sort of witnessing it, and thus we're witnessing it sort of firsthand. And on top of that, like we're cutting back and forth between what's going on with them and the rampage itself. Plus, you've got Dee Wallace chasing them, and then Jeffrey Combs shows up. The way it just keeps piling on, the danger is, and the different levels of danger is really. I love the climax. Like that the entire last half an hour really is fucking amazing.
It's why it's, 2/3 of the write up on the Wikipedia page, I think. uh, to the chat, because I think we've got to get some talking points from this as well. Josie says, I think the VFX work for the time here is pretty impressive, which we brought up. Spencer also said, my soul to take Defender here, Mr. AJ.
Oh God, Spencer, why? Well, when the Q&As come back, we're gonna have to talk about that.
Put a pin in it. Josie also says that she finished reading The Uninvited by Dorothy McCardle, which was excellent, and is now reading, or just about finished with, The Great Ghost Rescue from Eva Ibbotson. So far, so good. Josie then says, I like Trini Alvarado when she was in things. I wish she'd make a comeback. Yeah, as sort of the main female lead, she's actually not too bad. Because I don't recognize her name, but it's like she seems solid.
Really?
I mean, it's
I'd be okay. I'd be okay with just about anybody in this movie being in more things because it's a pretty amazing cast, but most of it is people you don't see very often now, if at all.
yeah, like I'm just looking. She's shown up in episodes of Black Box and The Staircase the last few years, and a couple of episodes of Fringe. But I think her last film stuff, I see All Good Things. I see The Good Guy, Little Children. Not a huge amount. She's happy
I don't know
doing, I
why
guess,
I
a
remember.
very limited schedule.
I don't know why I remember this, but I'm pretty sure she was the sister in Stella Dallas, or Stella, the remake of Stella Dallas. Excuse me.
Uh, Let the computer load. Let's double check. Further up. Oh yeah, there's Stella from 1990, which says a lot because, like, at the top of the Wikipedia it says best known for The Frighteners and Little Women, the '94 version,
Yeah.
as opposed to every other version. It was during filming this on location that Fox made up his mind that he'd had enough of being away from his family making movies and decided to head to the small screen and do Spin City. Turned out to be his last leading role in a film. Well, yeah, I guess. Because he was only a supporting role in Mars Attacks, really.
Yeah, he just has a few scenes in it.
Fox repeatedly blew his lines by calling the judge Doc.
Yeah.
He done too many. Fox performed many of his own stunts in the film, but ironically broke his foot by a simple fall while filming in the forest at night. Although Jackson said that injury was acted as a blessing in disguise because it allowed him then to work on the script some more and edit some of the film scenes while Fox recovered for a week. And then an interesting one, considering what film is coming out in about 2 weeks. Josie brings up the film was originally supposed to be a PG-13, but the MPAA thought the film was too intense and gave it an R. I find that interesting because it's completely the opposite with Five Nights at Freddy's. It probably should be an R, and if you go by the British to American translation of the ratings, Freddy over here is a 15, which would be the equivalent of R in the US. But apparently in America, Five Nights at Freddy's is a PG-13. Despite like the threat and everything and the sinister nature of it. So again, it's sort of like, so if the Frighteners is too scary, how come animatronics that literally sort of rip people apart isn't? Do people not look into the lore of the games when they're doing this? I guess not. God, that means we're going to be getting 12 and 13-year-olds playing a game which I think technically is age gated for them, so great job. Yeah, no matter how much Jackson would edit the film to try and get the desired rating, the ratings board just, no, it's an R. They truly are idiots. Sometimes.
Or or they loved the movie and just wanted to get paid to watch it over and over again. We'll say that.
Josie says, I'm surprised this isn't played as much on TV as other spooky season movies. Yeah.
They before it got revamped to just basically play like straight to video Sharknado movies and shit like that. It the first time I saw it, it used to be on the Sci-Fi Channel all the time, but that was like 20 years ago.
Which fits because USA Network, NBC Universal, so I guess now it's just on Peacock. Probably. Danny Elfman was so impressed with Heavenly Creatures that he offered to do the score for one of Jackson's next films and agreed to it without even knowing what it was about.
Yeah, I think to my understanding, most people wanted to do this movie because they loved Heavenly
Yeah,
Creatures.
yeah, that happened. That was Fox reasoning. Hell, Frank's love interest is Lucy Linsky, which is obviously a nod to Melanie Linsky, who even
Yeah,
cameos in the
who's
thing as
just hanging
well.
out in a scene.
We
It does
get
make
that sort of
it,
meta with Weta.
yeah, that's. I mean, I know we just praised the main actress a little bit, but it's like it does make you wonder when you see Melanie Linsky actually in the movie, and it's like this is a cute cameo and everything, but why not just put her in the movie if she was there, like in a real part?
I will say, Elfman's score didn't really jump at me as like being a really good bit. I think he's done better, but it did set the right sort of atmosphere that you needed for certain bits, I would say.
Yeah, it's not as recognized because the cool thing about Elfman is that his music has a very specific sound to where as soon as you hear it, you know it's Elfman. But he can do things so uniquely that you can just hear like one or two notes and not only recognize that it's him immediately, but specifically like which score it comes from.
Yeah.
And this is one where it's like I don't think I could pick this score out of a lineup, but I love how it goes with the feel of the movie.
When when Dame Fran Walsh and Sir Peter Jackson were writing the part of a drill sergeant in the graveyard, they wrote the part as a spoof of Ermey's character with the intention of getting an actor in New Zealand for the role. Turns out Universal was like, no, we'll just get him. He's probably cheaper. Charles Starkweather, the real-life killer referenced in the film, killed 11 people and 2 dogs. Why didn't that get included? Unless that was the dog that was randomly at the start and never showed up again. The dog is gone. His 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Fugate, accompanied him for and participated in most of the killings. Which obviously is the... Well, I think they obviously changed the age difference there because I think you said she's supposed to be like 7 or 8. I think in relation to what happened. I guess because she was in the children's ward, probably at the hospital. More than likely. Melanie Linsky and Kate Winslet are visible on the cover of a serial killer video that Lucy watches, recreating a famous photo of their real-life characters from Heavenly Creatures. There we go. This is the actual bits for... It's not on Wikipedia, but IMDb probably helps with this. Thanks, Josie. It was originally planned as a Tales from the Crypt feature, but Zemeckis liked the script so much, he thought it should actually just be a standalone film and not be anything relating to crypty stuff. Peter Jackson and Zemeckis unsuccessfully campaigned to have the film released in October for Halloween week, which might be crucial. Let me have a look, because it came out in August, I believe, of '96.
Yeah, because that just, I mean, even without everything else, that would just be a title that sells itself in October. That that was a really weird move to not go with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to have a quick check. Weekend. No, I don't want this weekend. I want to go back to... I should probably just search for Frighteners and guess. And try and get that up. Because I know it was number 5 and only sort of took like 5 million. And it just about made its opening. There's his original release. Domestic. Oh, and that was the other thing that really went against it. It was right in the middle of the Atlanta Olympics. Of which I think one of the lines is, how am I supposed to have a successful film? And it's like, well, you know, you're up against the Olympics. You know, that won't be too much competition. And I think the thing he said was, how can I do competition? America's only had 3 Olympics in 100 years. Where do I draw the comparisons? Which is probably why it struggled. It was the highest new release of that week, coming behind Nutty Professor, Courage Under Fire, Phenomenon, and Independence Day. Finished just ahead of Fled, Multiplicity, and Kazam! And then a really limited release of Trainspotting. Okay. So now I need to try and jump ahead, because now I want to try and look at the October releases. Wait, I do. Oh, I can do that and say week 42. That's probably about Halloween time. Yeah. So for the week of like October 18th to 20th, the only big film that released that week was Sleepers. And then on what probably would have been Halloween weekend, 25th to the 27th, we had High School High and Finner. None of which seemed to be horror themed at all. And the first week in
I
November
mean,
was Romeo and Juliet. So,
I mean, Thinner's supposed to be horror, but that's up for debate, I guess.
well, it didn't stand out as like one that I'd heard of. Finner is one that I wasn't aware of. I was aware of the Frighteners. Trying to see if there's anything else. The Ghost in the Darkness. Don't know what that is. Um,
That's the Lion movie with Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer.
Independence Day was still at number 13 in its 17th week that last week in October. Jeez. No wonder that was the best-selling film that year, at least in terms of US box office. So you do see that sort of it might have had a chance if it actually had been released in its scheduled spot rather than rushed out early.
This is the really annoying thing about that in general is how perfect of a Halloween movie it is because we're talking about that combination of horror and comedy, and it's like it's how it has those horror elements, but it's so fun. That's basically what Halloween is.
Yeah,
So that it's so wild to me that they were like, no, the summer will be fine.
and there's literally no blood as well. It's just the threat and the peril and like the idea of a serial killer
Oh,
doing stuff.
Jeffrey Combs' head exploding.
Oh,
Is that the only like really graphic thing
I
in it?
think so. Because all the deaths by quote unquote heart attack sort of just they fall and everything. Um, Nobody else gets shot or anything. That maybe the closest would be the ghost getting cut in half, the judge getting sliced, and the the sergeant major getting done down the middle. Maybe. Yeah, Jersey says the studio wanted it as a summer release, which ultimately backfired. From the half point of the film onwards, Lucy wears only one outfit, the pink shirt, which eventually became a running joke throughout the film, such that on the last day, the crew presented her a Barbie doll with the Lucy dressed outfit on as a gift. Greta was ahead of her time. uh, this makes sense considering what you've already spoke about him, AJ. Jackson loved Jeffrey Combs' work on the Reanimator film so much he asked the casting director to find out whether he was still available and working since he was unsure. Fortunately, Combs was available and signed up, and wore black contact lenses for the role. Full on coat. Weta Digital had to expand their capacity from one computer to 35 computers in order to meet the visual effects demand for the movie. And I guess it was those 35 which may have expanded to more than that for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, at least eventually. Oh, but the film did not get released in Tasmania, Australia, as the Port Arthur massacre spookily mirrored the film's content and happened not long before it was supposed to be released. but was released on video and subsequently broadcast for, I guess, those local people. Wow, this is what an interesting. I think you were right about the heavenly creatures thing, because if Fox hadn't have got the Frank Bannister role, apparently the considerations were Cruz, Broderick, Depp, Cusack, and randomly Danny DeVito. The hell?
I could, I could totally. I mean, I love this movie as it is, and I wouldn't change it. But I can so vividly see Cusack doing that part, actually,
Mm-hmm.
especially this era Cusack.
Yeah, just a few years after Grosse Pointe Blanc and all that. And if Broderick had made that, he might not have made Godzilla. So, who knows? During filming, Dee Wallace. Oh, there we go. Yeah, during filming, Dee Wallace's husband, Christopher Stone, died of a blood clot, forcing her to fly back and forth. And there, Jackson had personally paid for them all. Oh, another alumni of the show, Joe Mantegna, auditioned for the role of Milton Dammers. He might have been able to pull it off as well, to some extent.
I can
I don't
I
think
can
he's got the
see.
same
I
pizzazz and vigor that Combs brings, but I
I, was gonna
feel
say-
from his character work he'd be able to do something akin to it. I don't think he'd go as over the top as Combs did.
I was gonna say I can see him doing Unhinged, but I think that the character as we see him in the movie, I don't think would have worked unless it was Jeffrey Combs. Like
Yeah,
he's that perfect level of crazy. Where if any other actor tried to do it that heightened, I think it might have been a disaster because it's a tightrope walk to go that tone.
hmm the last time a film directed by Peter Jackson was rated R until the extended cut of Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies came out 18 years later. Josie says, I wish Jackson would make another horror film. I mean, I guess it's more. I guess Lovely Bones is more of a psychological thriller than horror outright.
Yeah, well, Lovely Bones is more fantastical. I feel like you can tell the Lovely Bones comes from the same vision as Heavenly Creatures, even though it has those sort of like fantasy elements in it. I I'm trying to imagine. I'm almost afraid he'd be too serious about it if he made another horror movie. Whereas if he were to go back to the genre, we'd want him to do the really over the top, like borderline comedy, if not flat out comedy kind of horror that he does do or did. He'd have to go back to his old style rather than try to incorporate his more what's the terms I'm looking for? I don't even know.
Styles and
I don't, for some reason, I'm just thinking he put too serious of a tone on it, and he wouldn't try to go back to the comedic style and the over the top gory nature that he was known for before.
yeah, I
Even
see what you mean.
even not necessarily gory, just something really heightened, like Dead Alive or Meet the Feebles or this. Or
The free graveyard ghosts are so hilarious. Josie also loves the dinner date scene. Because I'm guessing, of course, we use CGI to take sort of Ghost Dad away. or make him look spiritual for the certain bit. The blatant dramatic irony with the Hobson's ghost with the dinner date.
I will say if there's one scene I'm not sure how I feel about it, I guess it would be John Aston fucking the mommy.
Yeah.
With everything else in this movie, I think that's where I draw the line at. Maybe that was a little too much.
Yeah, that was an actual sort of like, you know, if you'd have just seen the sort of, I think if you saw like the sarcophagus just move, implying it, it'd be better than having ghost ass come up and down like out of the lid. Like, oh, we're literally making it that blatant. Oh wait, okay. Holy moly. Trini Alvaro previously starred in The Chair, another film about an electrocuted prisoner returning as a ghost. Danny Elfman's score is so much fun. Imagine if Frank Bannister assisted the Hobbits with a ghost case. What would happen? Balrog, probably. Or Sauron would go, bye bye. Production designer Grant Major won for Return of the King and was actually nominated a couple of years ago for Power of the Doog. Makes sense with the New Zealand connection. Costume designer for this also did the costumes for Willow and the Ash vs. Evil Dead series and was assistant costume designer for Scooby Doo. Because that fits. Peter Jackson. Oh my word, did you plan this? Did you plan this, AJ? Peter Jackson's birthday is October the 31st.
Actually, did not know that.
He's a Scorpio. Wait, Dirty Harry. Oh, it all makes sense. Zodiac. It all fits. Josie says, I rewatched Dead Alive on Friday. The blood and gore in that movie is so creative. Yeah, it's always like when you see that sort of. That's why I'm always. It'll come round eventually, some point. Because I don't think it would have. Yeah, because it would have been 2007, so it would have been before it. But I feel Black Sheep was very much like the Peter Jackson film we never got. It did feel sort of that sort of brain dead, bad taste sort of style gore, but also the same sort of humour. Bry's in chat and says the Back to the Future trilogy is not the only time that Zemeckis and Fox worked together. I really enjoyed the film and one that didn't have any jump scares. Yeah, that's pretty novel as well. A supernatural thing that doesn't have cheap or not cheap jump scares. Am I the only one that thinks Trini looked like Jennifer Connelly and that Jake Busey looked like Biff? At certain points, I was thinking, wait, Biff Tannen's here.
I've never seen Jake Busey and thought of Biff, but I think the first time I saw Back to the Future, I thought of Jake Busey when I saw Biff himself. Like I might be thinking of Griff from Part Two, maybe.
More so. Uh-oh. Just to bust AJ's chops. It'd be very interesting to see how Frank will communicate with Casey Affleck's ghost in the Ghost Story. It also be
Well,
interested. Yeah.
I'm just imagining like having a movie like The Frighteners and then him going into like this artsy realm. It's like two different dimensions.
Josie also says it'd be interesting to see if Bannister communicate with the ghosts of Hill Valley, dating back to the Old West. Yeah, Brian mentioning there, one thing is the VFX didn't age well. And Patricia, for some scenes, looks a lot like Bonnie Wright for post her Harry Potter sort of stuff.
I'm guessing that's the younger version we're talking about.
Yeah. And then Josie's last words for today, not related to Frighteners, but first time watches since the last one, Trick or Treat. So I guess we're sorting that out for 2 weeks' time. The Velvet Vampire, The Others, The Queen of Spades, Vampires in Havana, Magic from 1978, Midori from 92, Frankenhooker, Jacob's Ladder, and the 91 version of Cape Fear.
I'm surprised some of those are first times for her.
And Bryos says also, do we all know that Frank and Dr. Lucy were going to get together by the end? I mean, the first hint that I got of it was obviously the restaurant scene. That it could have been sort of a thing. But it does make me wonder whether they just actually played it sort of straight and he stayed sort of single.
Yeah, yeah, because I guess the thing that makes sense is that they both have a dead spouse they have to move on from, and so why not with each other?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like 9 times out of 10, if you watch a movie, and there's a male lead and a female lead, you just kind of automatically assume they're gonna do something like that, even whether it fits or not. The movie's gonna try it 9 times out of 10.
Josie says, because of Meet the Feebles, I'd love to see Peter Jackson do an Avenue Q adaptation or another dirty puppet film. Imagine how humorous it might have been if he directed the Happy Time Murders.
I was just getting ready to say I'm afraid the Happy Time Murders might have kind of killed that genre at least for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, Bryce says it was released about the same weekend as Trainspotting, although it was as I said, it was a very limited release. And then also apparently they re-released Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory around that time as well. What
I
would
guess
that?
that would have been a 5 anniversary, whichever one.
Yeah, 71, so it would have been 25.
25th. Yeah.
Bry also says when I heard Hermes' voice, I knew it was Sarge from Toy Story. He only did everything. What would Frank's paranormal investigator reality TV show be called, and what channel would it be on? Trying to think of a name. Maybe
And say
something.
this
Maybe
is a,
something like Spirits Within, because it sort of would still be sort of the con that you'd sort of. I don't want to say something that actually exists, like Paranormal Investigations or Most Haunted and stuff like that, but like Spirits Within sort of has a mystic sort of feel to it that looks and sounds dramatic to some extent. And it'd probably be
yeah,
on
this
like
is
Crime and Investigation or something.
I say this is a fun question, and I know there's a better answer to it, but I don't think my brain is awake enough to get
Yeah.
there.
But yeah, thank you for everybody in chat for that. if you want to get your last stuff in. Oh, Josie's already done it. To play off Spin City, maybe it should be called Spirit City. There it is. Only on TBS. Uh, so, in terms of final thoughts, yeah, it's the first time I've seen it in quite a while. Because again, it doesn't get that much airplay over here. But I think it delivers. It's unsurprisingly a good Peter Jackson film. Admittedly, like some of the Hobbit ones, I don't think are excellent, but they still are solid and like deliver the story. There's nothing that I've seen which is that's been exceptionally sort of Peter Jackson. Why did you do this? Maybe when we get to Tintin 2, we'll find one. I don't know.
I remember that was the initial reaction to The Lovely Bones for a lot of people, but I think people are coming around on it lately.
Yeah, it's not atrocious. There's sort of elements there that are very sort of interesting, and I like where it goes. But oh, so I'm just looking at The Lovely Bones, and it's like the BBFC received 24 objections, saying that some of the scenes deserve to be in an 18 rather than a 12A, because of course it did.
I do wonder if I wonder if it's also been the rise of Saoirse Ronan's kind of been bringing people back to it too. I would think.
Maybe. Um, Maybe also like that was Peter Jackson realizing he shouldn't. Well, if he does adapt books, he should only adapt, relatively old ones, rather than, because I think there was only sort of like a 6 or 7 year difference, because I think the book came out in the early 2000s and the film was '09. Oh, I forgot that there might be the only one that Jackson was involved with. Admittedly, he didn't direct, but I vaguely remember him being involved and did the screenplay for Mortal Engines. That might be the only one that I think was a big misfire. But that's probably because the intention of that was to be, oh, it's going to be a series, right? No. Very much no. It went up on the heap with, what was it? Divergent and the Mortal Bones. Those young adult things that like, oh, we're finishing them off, we're doing them, and then it's like, no. To some extent, Tintin did that as well, though. Although that might be because everybody that they wanted to be in that was unavailable because they were all doing other stuff. But yeah, a really nice little film. It's something that I'll probably go back to again here and there. This time, actually, rather than having to look on YouTube and remember, oh wait, that's the Peter Jackson cameo. Rather than just actually miss it. As opposed to a lot of his other performances that I've seen over the years. Where I was like, wow, there he is. But yeah. Very solid. And AJ? Being the selector?
I pretty much the thing that I was saying about how bizarre it is. They tried to go for summer instead of October when I described how it's a perfect Halloween movie because it combines horror and fun, and that's what Halloween is. Those were going to be my final thoughts, but I got so frustrated thinking about how they fucked that up. I just went ahead and said it early. But yeah, and it's also something that I try to make an annual viewing around this time of year because it's just one of those movies that really captures that feeling for me of this whole season, and that's one of the many reasons that I love it so much.
I do find it interesting that it came out on Laserdisc the same year, but all the other sort of home video and DVD stuff was like a year or so later. The Laserdisc was literally before 96 ended, but the first DVD release was 98, which I'd have thought they would have been able to come out in 97 because, you know, Twister was one of the first big. Twister and Independence Day were the first big sort of DVD films, really. So, I mean, that's what I remember when it was like, you know, you'd get invited around to somebody's house and it's like, look at the DVD player. Here's the bit from The Matrix. Here's the bit from Independence Day. Here's the car chase from Ronin, which was like, that's random, but also it introduced me to Ronin, so I will allow it. uh, but yeah, so thanks to Josie and Bry, and a brief appearance from Spencer at the start. We will be back in 2 weeks to cover the final part of our October based trilogy, and that is Chris's selection of Trick or Treat from, I think, 2014?
I think it's like 2007 or something.
Oh no, 2007. I'm trying to remember why I thought it was 2014. Was it because it got re released then?
Yeah, it got released at some point, much later.
Yeah. I just remember, like, it showing up from out of nowhere, but, like, being. Yeah, it premiered at the Bottomathon, but didn't show up in cinemas until 2 years later in 2009. Oh, but that was only at festivals. That's why. That's why I remember it. Because its first proper theatrical release was 12 months ago. It was literally just word of mouth and home media releases on DVD, and eventually Blu-ray and the Shout Factory Collector's Edition Blu-ray from about 5 years ago. But we'll touch more on that, I guess, in a couple of weeks. Uh, that's arguably the ultimate cult thing, because it literally was the equivalent of tape trading. That's the only way you could see it. So we'll touch on that next time around. Meanwhile, check out all the other archive content on the channel, be it my sip and snacks and gaming stuff, or Owen's Voices of Liberty and sip and snacks. And then for the rest of the month, as AJ alluded to, we've got a lot of spooky related verses and all that sort of stuff. Do you want to drop any hints as to anything else coming for the rest of this week?
We're going to be dealing with rodents in a couple of days. Maybe some aliens of some kind. A director's trilogy, and then 3 movies by his son the next day. And a review video with 10 horror new releases from this year on it.
Oh wow!
Is a is a few of them.
The
So yeah,
bump,
that video is a pain in the ass, but it's it's getting there.
the bundle. Is one of them related to a number 10 or an X on Twitter?
Yeah, that'll be the first. Actually, that'll be the first one on that video.
So there you go. If you want the good modern spooky things, well, it might not be good. I don't know. I don't know what the review said. Keep it peeled to the channel this week. You can find the channel itself at Popcast Network on X Twitter. Owen can be found at Sir Owen Disney as well to give you the details as to when the videos go up and when live streams are around. I'm on X Twitter at AshesMyNameUK. And AJ cannot be found on the social medias. And just like Keith Richards, cannot be killed by the conventional weapons. Or a ghost scythe, as we saw in today's film. So, thanks everybody for joining us live. Thanks everybody for joining us on the archive, if you're catching us that way. And until next time, everybody, spooky dookies!